Okay, so welcome everybody to the Parlor Car Chat for this morning. This slide on the screen right now is basically the homepage of the museum's website, and it's there mainly to remind you that this is a program of the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum, the Parlor Car Chats are. And if you are of a mind to make a donation to the museum based on how much you enjoyed these Parlor Car Chats, or for any other reason, there are opportunities to do that on the website. And in the little white box there, kind of in the center, you can see the word make a donation. So that's that. One technical point for everyone who's online watching this: if you want to, for some reason, communicate with me during the presentation, and I'm the presenter today too, use the chat system, which should be available to you in your controls somewhere. It'll have the word chat or that sort of cartoon text bubble, dialogue bubble, one or the other. Get on there and make your comment or ask your question. And we'll also try to save some time at the end to have some open Q&A too, if we can keep the microphones and the noise under control. Let's see. David is telling me he can't see anything. I assume everybody at the museum is okay. If you're not seeing anything, let me know. But I think, David, it might be a problem at your end since nobody else is having that issue. So if you wouldn't mind pursuing that on your own. Okay, moving on. So today we're talking about the cog railway that goes up from Manitou Springs in Colorado to the top of Pikes Peak, to the summit. And this is obviously an old picture. We're going to start with a little bit of the history stuff. There's a guy, Mr. Simmons, who is of the Simmons Beauty Rest Mattress Company, Simmons, who in the late 1880s came out to Pikes Peak to check on an insulator that he invented or installed, or something that had installed for telegraph wires that ran all the way to the signal station, the Army signal station on the summit. And in order for him to get up there, just to inspect the insulators on this telegraph system, he had to take a 2-day journey by mule to get from the base of the mountain, basically Manitou Springs, up to the top. So he was motivated and decided, there really ought to be some way for this to be easier and made available to more people. It's such a wonderful area, great scenery, so on and so forth. So in 1889, the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railway Company was founded, and in that same year they actually started construction of the track. And then in 1890, just 1 year later, they had 3 steam locomotives, all Baldwins, and those can still be seen. Well, they had 3 as of that point. They had 5 eventually, 5 steam locomotives, and 3 of the 5 can still be seen somewhere in the country. Number 2 is on display in downtown Manitou Springs, right at the base of the mountain. Number 4 is at the Grand Canyon Railway, and number 5 is at the Broadmoor Hotel on display, which is a fancy hotel here in Colorado Springs. So if you ever get out here to ride this cog rail, don't miss those, or at least the 2 that are local. Here's another look at some of the original steam equipment. Oh, hang on. Sorry about that. I have a dog that's going to bark all the time if I don't let him in the room. Okay, so here's some of the original equipment hauling to get the railway built. You can see underneath the mule there, though, that at least here at this point on the railway, and I'm not sure where it is, the rail and the cog are all in place already. Here's a little more modern picture of the railway. I'm not sure what era that was, but I do know, and in fact I mentioned in the description for this program, that the first train up with passengers was June 30th, 1891. So here in about 7 weeks or so, they will celebrate their 130th anniversary of taking passengers to the top of Pikes Peak. And I also mentioned in the description that it was kind of interesting who the passengers were on that first trip up the mountain. It was actually the second attempt to get up the mountain. There was the day before there was a whole bunch of diplomat type people set to go up, but they had some sort of problem and it didn't happen. So the next day, I guess because most of the diplomats were no longer government people, who knows, dignitaries, weren't available, it was a church choir that got on board that train for the first trip up. And I got a kick out of that. At least they had God on their side lest anything happen. But more importantly, I got a kick out of it because I was a church choir director for a decade or so. And church choir groups are pretty intensely integrated. They're a pretty tight group. If you've ever been involved in one, you probably know what I'm talking about. So I thought I got a kick out of the fact that the first group up was a church choir. On the left, it's kind of hard to imagine actually doing, but they made sleds for the railway that an individual could come down on for a quick top to bottom trip for workers and whatnot. And there's a picture on the left of one of the folks riding the sled down, which they say got up to about 60 miles an hour. That had to have been a pretty wild ride. On the right-hand side, you can start to get the notion of how complicated a switch might be for a cog railway. At least initially, back in the 100 and some years ago, there were 9 separate steps to the throwing of one of these switches. And there's an interesting story that's available to you if you want in the links that will be provided on the web page after this is over, about a accident that happened because a switch didn't get fully positioned correctly on the railway. Here are just a series of pictures to indicate that there are a lot of cog systems, or they also refer to them as rack systems. So you might see a cog railway or rack railway. And again, in the links, there'll be a link to a Wikipedia article that describes all of these types of rack or cog railways. Okay, this gets us to fall of 2017 when I got to ride the cog railway, and we're going to have a lot of pictures from that trip following here. This is just a piece of artwork that was available that day in the gift shop of the cog railway, just to kind of get this started. Unbeknownst to us when we wrote it that day was that the railway was going to shut down the following spring for a 3-year hiatus. To ultimately what happened is, right at the very beginning, they weren't sure if they were going to shut down or rebuild or what. But they, in the course of a year, roughly, I'm guessing, maybe a few months either way of that, they finally put together a financing plan and so on that made sense. The cities got involved, the Broadmoor got involved, of course the cog railway got involved. Excuse me. And they finally put together a project, a $100 million project, to pretty much rebuild this railroad over the course of the next 3 years. And they are now just reopening. I think their first actual trip is the end of May 20-something. And I also believe they're already selling tickets for that trip and the rest of the season, which goes into the fall. So on with the trip. Here we go. Here was a shot from the passenger platform, the passenger station of the base of the trip. And here's where all the cars are stored. You can see in the lower center, there's one car on definitely a yard type siding. The two cars in the background, the two trains, I should say, in the background, are on the rail on the line that actually goes up the mountain. I guess one of them would be considered a siding, but they're on their way up the mountain or on their way back down, one or the other. I think the train on one of them is about to pull into the station to pick us up. And speaking of the station, here's a picture of what the station looks like. I think on the left there you can see a few people. That's the boarding side. If you were getting off the train, you would get off on that blue side. There on the left is another shot of the same area that we looked at a minute ago, the two far right tracks going up and on to the mountain. Everything else is more yard tracks down below to get into the engine houses and so on, or rail car houses. And on the right is a more close-up picture of one of the rail cars coming into the station. Each rail car has its own docent or guide along who provides commentary up and down, and there's a surprising amount of things to talk about on the trip. About the railway, its history, what it's doing, what you're going to see or do at the top when you get there. And also, particularly to me, being a geologist by academics, you go through about, in the 8,000 feet you climb from the base where the station is to the summit, through that 8,000 feet, you go through a number of microclimates, you go through a number of geologic areas that all talk to in the case of the geologic ones, talk to how the mountain range was formed, at Pikes Peak in particular. And we went from very lovely fall weather, you can see the golden aspens there along the way, up to the top where you'll see later there was snow on the ground and there wasn't a live bush outside to be seen. It's well above the tree line at that point. So it's a very interesting ride up, not just what the scenery, but what's the meaning of what it is you're looking at. Here's a little bit of the geology. There's you parallel a running stream often on the trip up. Here's an old water tank that was trackside. I'm pretty sure. Well, I don't know what they do with it now. Actually, it does look in the slide like there's water coming out of a pipe filling the tank, but I have no idea what they do with that water now. There's some more of the interesting geology that you go by, and a more panoramic view, seeing across to other mountains. Here's what being on the inside of the car looks like. There's our guide or docent in the back with the microphone in his hand, and a bunch of other people on the old wooden seats that people often complained about as I was reading reviews. I don't remember being, felt like second-class citizen or anything, or using those seats. But I also do understand that the new cars have more plush seats, maybe a little foam padding even. There's a reservoir of some sort on the way up the mountain. Now, this is an interesting location. Let's see, what is the name of this name? This location has a name to it. It was basically a worker's house or place on part way up the mountain. You can see we're above the tree line now, so we've made quite a bit of progress. And you can see a rail car there on the left side of the track. siding for this building off to the right. Gosh, I can't remember the name. Maybe it'll come up in another slide. But it was an interesting spot on the way up. Oh, there's the name right there. How about that? Windy Point. We're at 12,129 feet according to the sign, which means we only have about 2,000 more feet to go to get to the summit. We passed a work train, work rail car. I think they're all the cars are self-propelled. They link them together for purposes of group size and so on, but each car is its own transport or has its own locomotion. So that's why you often see cars all by themselves. And here's a work train doing something with the track probably. And speaking of the track, here's what this cog railway system looked like back in 2017. I don't know, and maybe we'll see in pictures later when we look at the new stuff, if there's detail enough to tell what the new cog system looks like. And here we're passing a car. Well, we're still going up, so this group is going down. And there's the other group as they go past Windy Point. We're already up above Windy Point a little bit, taking this picture. There's a panoramic view of what some of the trackage looked like. That's the same car that was headed down. I showed you closer a minute ago, just before. And now it's further away from us, and it's further away from Windy Point, and we're further away from Windy Point going the other way. So it gives you a more panoramic kind of view of the moonscape type landscape when you're above the tree line. Again, this is about 12,000 feet altitude. This is a little fun fact. This is the highest and longest cog railroad, certainly in the country. It might be the continent, and it's possible that it's for the world. I'm not sure highest and longest in one sense, but it's a 3-hour round trip. It takes you about 30 to 40 minutes to get to the top. You go from the low 6,000 foot mark to just above 14,000 feet. That number, the height of Pikes Peak changes a little bit depending on who you talk to and when the measurement was taken, and meaning over that 130 years and all that sort of stuff. The average grade is about 16%, with a maximum of 24. At least that was true with the old railroad. I read somewhere, I thought I saw somewhere, that the new railroad, the average grade has been reduced, but I don't see how that's possible. We go from X thousand feet to Y thousand feet. One way or another, the average grade is going to be the same. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. So somewhere between 12 and 16% average, 24% maximum. There's another one of those lakes that are partway up the mountain. Still below the tree line, though, so it's not too far up. There's a view across the way to another mountain that obviously was a site of a quarry, some sort of mining activity going there. I'm sorry, I don't know what it was. There is gold mining in the area. There's all kinds of mining in the area. If you throw a 100-mile radius around Colorado Springs up into the mountains, you can hit all kinds of things, from gold to silver to just rock for buildings and everything in between. Well, that should give your heart a jump. It did us, when you start approaching. I think there might be a little camera lens accentuation of this grade, but a 24% grade is pretty darn steep, and it felt like you were going up some that were like this. Well, you were going up some that were like this. There's a view from the top. You can see snow on the ground. I think those are the two lakes that I took pictures of earlier on the trek up. I'm pretty sure. And here's the end of the line. that rail car on the right there, the red car, is parked up against the track end bumper at literally the end of the line. The mountain falls off just beyond that rock backstop, you might say, and keeps going down for about 8,000 feet. It's not a cliff, but it's close enough to it you wouldn't want to jump off of there. On a clear day up on the summit, you can see to 5 different states, if you can imagine that. You can see Colorado, obviously, but you can also see Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Kansas on a clear day. I'm not sure that this day was that clear. Here's another view from the summit. There's a plaque there that I don't remember now what it talks about. And that's a view west of something. If you look east, you mostly see plains because it's part of the Front Range. So everything east of us here in Colorado Springs is plains, and everything west of us here is the Rockies, from the Front Range all the way up to full-on Rockies. Here's a sign at the summit that suggests the 14,115-foot summit elevation. Just to give you an idea of some of the other numbers that have been used over the years, there was a time when it was measured at 14,109. There was a time when it was measured at 14,147, and that was because they added a summit house tower, and they measured to the top of the tower. When they rebuilt that summit house, I guess it only took it to 14,110, so it lost 37 feet when they rebuilt it. This 14,115 foot mark is what Congress decided the height officially was in 2002, and so it remains, I suppose. But as of today, even the National Forest Service says it's 14,100 even. And they say that it's because it was measured at that at some point in the past, and they're sticking with it. That's how they put it. You can hike to the top of Pikes Peak if you want to. And when we were up there, these three, as well as some other hikers, actually came up upon the crown, you might say, from below and visited the summit house and did whatever else they were going to do. So we did see some hikers doing their thing. And this is a good time to see them because they just become successful and feeling pretty good. There's another view out from the summit to other lakes and whatnot. I'm not sure what lake we're looking at here, but out into the Rockies. There's a longer view. That stop that I showed, the end of track bumper and the rock bundle of rock, that was right out here at this end. So here are 3 cars parked at the summit. All the people are off the train enjoying what's at the summit. Their big claim to fame, by the way, and you have to have one if you ever are at the summit, is their donuts. I got such a kick out of people talking about, you got to have a donut, you got to have a donut. It's the best donut in the world whenever you get up here. Well, you know what? They're good donuts. I'm not sure it's the best donut I've ever had in the world, but they're very proud of them, and everybody gets one. So I would encourage you to not miss that opportunity if you get up here. Whether you drive or take the train or what, you can do that. There's just a long shot of things with a little bit more of the cog railway exposed there track-wise. There's another angle on the parked cars at the summit. There's a shot through the cars, clearly snow on the ground, and just beyond where those rocks, tan rocks, end, that does drop off pretty dramatically. It's not a cliff, but it's not a fall you would want to take either. And here's what the car looks like when we're at the summit. You can see the building in the background there. You can see that sign that I showed you a picture of earlier. People are coming and going, those who wanted to spend more time in the summit. I think I described it. It's basically a 3-hour trip. It takes you a little over an hour to get up. You have 30 to 40 minutes at the summit to look at the gift shop and watch some movies and do other things. And now the summit shop is totally brand new. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So there's actually much more to do up there, and then the little over an hour to get back down. There's that end of track bumper on the other. There was 2 rails that go to the end, and that's the other one, obviously not the one we were on. There's one of those climbers I talked about who is enjoying his moment of "I did it." That gives you a good idea of what I meant by it's not a cliff, but it's a pretty steep and very jaggedy fall if you jumped off the top of the cliff/tracks up there. There's our guide doing his thing again. Another long shot. This is most likely an animal trail or maybe a shared trail, but there's a lot of wildlife up there. There's the reason I point this out. Longhorn sheep, I mean, some big animals up there that you can watch out for. Turkeys are up there. Not necessarily, it could be anywhere along the trip. It's not just the above tree line and not just the below tree line. There's another shot of a train, probably the one coming up as we're going back down. There's that lake from a different angle. A little more geology, a little more nature. There's an interesting shot of from our train or car across the top of the car in front of us going down, and then the track falling away from us as we descend down the mountain. There are some moments that are kind of interesting as you make this trip. There's another view as we go past it again, that water tower that I talked about on the way up. Here's a shot that shows you more what the end of the outcoming water pipe looks like. Now we're back down, obviously below tree line in the aspen groves, pine trees everywhere. There are some structures along the way, both I think unrelated to the railroad as well as some related to the railroad that are more like decorative or for Christmas or that sort of thing. There's those quaking aspens. Oh yeah, here's one of the Christmas decorative type buildings for when they do Christmas specials of one kind or another on the train. There's another one of those rivers, streams, creeks that the cog railway track often follows. Most of you into railroads recognize that railroad lines or main lines are often follow waterways. It generally accurately shows them a good grade to follow, a relatively continuous, even grade going from one spot to another. There's another view of that. You can see the grade on this is not like we're used to, most of us, in terms of railroads. This is pretty steep. And there's a couple more environmental shots. Some really fun geology if you're into that. Now we're looking down onto the town kind of area, Manitou, Colorado Springs. I'm not sure exactly which direction we're looking here. I would guess basically north. So you're looking along the Front Range. The plains would be to your right, and the mountains themselves would be to your left. All kinds of pines that we saw. We just saw a blue spruce in the previous slide. Here's another blue spruce. That's probably a spruce too, but not as blue. Pines, all kinds of conifers out there. It's really pretty. You can see the fall colors on these leaves here too, and these bushes. And this is the clock at the station that we left earlier. You can see we're on the paying attention anyway to the blue side now, which is where we're going to exit the train. And we must have taken basically an 11 to 2 trip, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Trip that day. Here's another shot of the Cog Railway Depot building, at least the way it looked then. I'm not sure. I have not been over there. I haven't studied pictures of the construction. I'm not sure what this looks like today. Manitou Springs, I thought I'd take a moment here to share a little bit about the area in case you ever get out here and want to do it. Manitou Springs is a fun little old town with interesting shops, interesting buildings, statuary you see there kind of on the right on that clock tower. Fun stuff to do. How about a fondue restaurant called the Mona Lisa? That's pretty fun. Sculptures everywhere. It's a cool little town. Good ice cream too. Don't let that get away from you. Manitou Springs is called Manitou Springs because of the water springs. It was a natural spring area. Lots of spas here to this day. And interestingly, around town for the sampling, there are outputs. There are places where you can sample 7 different, I think it's 7 different spring water flavors. I didn't quite taste that much difference from one to the next, but everybody maintains that all 7 are different because of the actual rocks that each is coming from and so on and so forth. So this is a picture of us sampling whatever spring this was somewhere in downtown Manitou Springs to see what the groundwater tasted like here. It was kind of fun. Here's a little bit more of what's going on in Manitou. It's a fun little touristy thing, including skee ball. That's my sister, very excited. She must have got a score in the 50 hole or something. This is the Cliff House, I think it's called. Oh yeah, up there in the corner you can see Cliff House. A fairly well-known hotel in Manitou, still operates as a hotel, has a nice restaurant in it. We haven't never stayed there yet, but we did eat there once, and it is a neat place. There's a little more of what Manitou looked like the day we were there. Another thing to do in the area is a place called Seven Falls, where you hike about a mile from a lower location up to where there's a significant set of falls, 7 of them actually. If you look at all the pieces, there's 7 different cascading parts to it. And all along the way, you're in country that looks like this. So it's another good thing to see if you're ever out here doing the Cog Railway, and it's literally the 2 doorsteps are very close to each other. Here's some of the water that you walk along going up. Here's some more of the trail. There's both rough trail dirt like in this picture, and there's also a macadam or asphalt kind of road type trail that you can follow too, depending on your whatever you want to do. Here's at the top is a restaurant at the top, another falls, and the falls we're going to look at in a minute are up behind here, off to the right, back behind and to the right, I think, of this building. And here they are. Here's the main falls. That building that we were just looking at here's the roof of it down here in the lower right corner of the leftmost picture. Right now, I'm taking this picture from a gift shop view area that's obviously quite a bit higher than the restaurant and the base of the falls. So it gave us the picture. So if you count these falls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this last one 7, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how they break them up. That's where the name Seven Falls comes from. And on the right is a closer picture of this area down here. If you can imagine that blown up to the right side over here, that's what that is. Also in the area is the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. And that's another thing not to miss if you're in Colorado Springs or anywhere near it. It's a really fun zoo. You practically get to know the families of the giraffes. It's really fun. Here's a view of the Broadmoor Hotel that I mentioned earlier that's part owner or a partner or the same company owns both, I'm not sure which, of the Cog Railway. So they're very rated. It's a very fancy 5-star kind of place in Colorado Springs. Just as a side, I actually came out here from California twice for a Space Foundation conference when I was working for the California Space Authority. And it was really fun. It's a great place to be. The Olympic Training Center here is in Colorado Springs. Is just a hop, skip, and a jump from where the Cog Railway is. So if you're into that. And there's also a new Olympic Museum just built. It just opened a few months ago. It's pretty fun, too. Okay, let's talk just a little bit, and then we'll be done, of the new construction that began in sometime in 2019, I think, and has finished up, and they are reopening this month. So there you can see one of the new rail cars coming in on flatbed. This whole project, this 3-year, $100 million project, is occurring now, well, finishing up now, after 126 years of operation on this railroad. That's when they shut down. They basically shut down the 2018 season. They had reviewed the status of the railroad, inspected the track, inspected the cars, blah 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 blah, and said, we can't do this anymore. It's either a significant upgrade or redo or whatever, or we're just going to shut down. And fortunately for those of us who like riding trains of various sorts, they managed to put together this $100 million project to rebuild the railroad basically and keep running. Whoops, let's see, I went too fast. There's an overview. Remember those tracks and the station that I showed you earlier? Well, this is an overview looking down on that area. This is the station house as it looks pretty recently. So in a way, it doesn't look too much change. Remember the blue station that used to be on the other side of the track doesn't seem to be there anymore. So I'm not sure how they're handling that, but there you go. Here's a rail car being lifted by this crane onto the track. A whole bunch of other rail cars apparently just arrived, also waiting to get onto the tracks. Here's a nice shot of the body, anyway, of the new cars. And here's one of the new cars out on the line. I don't think that cog system, it's hard to tell because it's pretty fuzzy in the foreground here. It doesn't look a whole lot different than the old system. Here's a picture of the snowplow that is now part of the roster out at the Cog Railway. This is obviously not the Cog Railway. You don't see any cog in these tracks. This is where it was still being tested somewhere in Europe, I believe, where it was built, probably. Oh, and another thing I should mention about the snowplow, there's a link below the entry for this chat on the web page where there's a video of them testing this snowplow on Pikes Peak. And it's very short and kind of impressive if you've never seen that sort of thing before. There's some work on the line, apparently before the cogs were put in. This is a picture they have on their website, and I couldn't convince myself if this was a experimental test kind of trip with some folks they gathered, or if this was an old picture or whatever. But it's on their current website, so I thought I'd throw it out here. There's the new system, and I would say it's very similar to the way it was before, alternating cogs like that. So there you go. Here's the new Summit House, and I'm not sure just how finished it is. There may be areas yet inside that aren't quite done or whatnot, but this is a vast improvement on that Summit House that we saw little bits and pieces of before. And they have more displays and exhibits and experiential kind of things to do in there that, from all vantage points, all 360 degrees, this thing kind of wraps around. And you get a better picture or feeling for that here. You can see that the building actually has a curvature to it where you can kind of walk around the top and see better in all kinds of directions. I do believe those are, this is sort of a faked up picture. I don't think these are the actual rail cars. It looks a little too drawn. But that is I think, if not actual construction, it's certainly an architect's rendering of what the summit is supposed to look like. Okay, that is it for the Cog Railway. One last thing before I open this up here for any questions or comments. Most of you probably know, but in case you don't, the museum is reopening. Yay, yay, yay. In fact, they already did have their first open Saturday last week, a week ago today, and are there today. There's a group watching this presentation, I understand, in the museum. They're open on Saturdays from 10 to 2. That's a little limited hours compared to what it was before, 10 to 4, but I'm sure it'll grow back eventually. And so nowadays, if you want to do something with your Saturday morning railroad-wise, you can actually go down to the museum. You don't need to have one of these chats, which the museum's reopening is probably mostly why there's no more chats scheduled at this point. That's not to say that the program won't continue, maybe a little more spotty or whatever as scheduled, maybe not on Saturday mornings, who knows. But for now, the Parlor Car Chats program is over in that there are no future chats scheduled. Of course, a reminder, there's recordings of all the Parlor Car Chats that you can go watch anytime, any of the chats that you want to. There's 30 of them out there after today. And so feel free to do that. And as I always point out, what's coming up next, it's not a chat, but it's the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum's drive-through barbecue and online auction fundraiser that actually will run for a period of time, 2 weeks almost, or about 2 weeks, from June 21 through June 26, culminating in a June 26th drive-through barbecue where you pre-order, prepay your meals and pick it up that day, and then an auction, an online auction that goes starting the 11th of June through the 25th, and then depending on who won what, when you come to pick up your food on the 26th, you will also pick up whatever auction items you manage to acquire during that bidding period. All this is, the detail that's available is on the website now. More is coming when the full auction site is up and running by the 11th, and so on. So, with that said, then, let me see if I can open this back up and see if there's any. Okay, I think we're all here now. Any questions about the chat today, or comments, or anything else for that matter?
Yeah, Jamie, I was wondering if you'd ever been to the Mount Washington Cog Railway and how you would compare them. I
have not. I read a little bit about that one, and in fact, the accident that I referred to earlier, which wasn't properly set, that occurred on that Mount Washington Cog Railway. But no, I've never ridden it. I don't know. If I ever get a chance, I will, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's a nice ride.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, nice presentation.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, we here at the museum enjoyed it, James.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
The museum's open.
Crowd of people watching.
Oh, look at that. Maybe I can hang on. Let me see if I can quit sharing my screen so everybody can see them. You may have to talk, Gary, to make that happen. Or maybe not.
Yeah. If I talk, it should, there we are.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see it open again.
Over a little further.
Okay, well, if that's it, we will sign off. Thanks
My day?
all for joining us. And
Yeah, I'm
And now what?
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Jamie. Thanks for all your chats.
you betcha. And don't forget to check out all the info about this barbecue and auction coming up in June.
later this
All
afternoon.
right.
As usual.
Everybody have a great Saturday.
You too.
Thank you.
This is the last
Oh, really?
since the museum's open.